Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back again for another episode, and we are going to take things in a little bit different direction today. We have Ribeiro, hope I got close to that, from J Scrambler in Portugal to visit with us today about some of the innovative steps he and his team are taking. It's going to be, I think, a fascinating exploration of some standards we don't get a chance to talk about enough. And certainly we don't get many guests from Portugal. So that makes it unique. So, Rui, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thank you, Tom. And it's great that we are going to explore two topics that I'm very passionate about. The first one is client side security. And the second one is, of course, the compliance topic that brings us here, which is PCI DSS compliance, which is related to credit cards.
So, could you tell us a little bit about your professional background?
Yeah, so I'm co-founder and CEO of J Scrambler. J Scrambler focuses on client side security, so making sure that the applications are intact and they are not leaking any information that they shouldn't be leaking to any third parties. I've been doing that since 2014. So that's basically my focus and where I drive my passion.
So, what one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you about this is certainly in the United States, security, client side security, and security of all data has now been elevated to a national security issue here in the United States. And that means the regulators are looking at it, and they are looking at companies perhaps they haven't looked at before. Obviously, Europe has GDPR and other robust data privacy regulations, but here in the United States, I don't want to say it's new because it's not, but there's more oversight and scrutiny. And I really wanted to give that introduction to ask you, why is PCI DSS version 4 a step forward in securing client side environments, but yet not the end?
It's a really good question. So PCI focuses on credit card information, which is a subset of all the private information that we have on the web. But it's a very important subset because if credit cards get stolen, then they can use them to, of course, to transactions that are unauthorized. So PCI Council has identified that a lot of the credit cards that are being stolen through web skimming, where by where third parties are accessing that information when the user is typing and putting that information to pay for some product that they are buying. So what's really important about this is that the PCI, for the first time, has defined we need to do something about how we capture that data. We need to bring that responsibility also to the merchants to make sure that they are not adding third parties that could be a liability to the end users. Because as a company that I am selling a product, I'm going to add everything to that page that I think will help me sell more. So all sorts of data gathering information, advertising information, tag management, chatbots, like they will add everything there to make sure that you are able to do the purchase. But at the same time, they're also adding all the risks of bringing a lot of people to that moment of the transaction. And the problem is that all of them can eavesdrop on the credit card information while it's being typed. And this is one of the things that they are solving with PCI DSS v4. They are solving a lot of other problems, but the ones that I'm really focused on is on this third-party management on the client side, making sure that transaction is secure.
Why do you view this as such a significant update from the previous version?
First, I think it's the first time that the standard. So I've been pitching about client-side security for many years in the and showing companies that while it is important for them to bring third parties to the equation so that they have a very good experience to their end users, you have to limit the access to information. Because if you don't limit access to that information, they will either by mistake or because of an attack access the information of the users. In the case of PCI, we're talking about credit card information, but if you're talking about an hospital, they would be accessing patient data. Or if you're talking about a government, passport, social security, that kind of information could be accessed by a third party that has no place in accessing that information. And That's why we have been pitching for a long time that we need to have the controls over all these third parties. We need to use them because that's what makes the web tick. That's what makes a good experience, but we need to have controls. And the PCI standard for the first time has said, yes, for sure, we need to have it. People are stealing credit cards, and it's coming from exactly those strategies.
In my kind of compliance, which is typically referred to as anti-bribery, anti-corruption compliance, we see it as a process. And what I've heard you say is basically, yes, this is a process. And that process includes third parties. That process includes merchants. And that process includes the end using customer. Would that be sort of a fair assessment of what you've sold us so far?
Yes, and I think that one thing that's also very important is that there is not just the process, is that we have the tech that backs up that process. Because the PCI Council is very, they will only issue directives where you have the capability to enforce them, or else it wouldn't be something that would be useful. And at the moment, we have the tech to be able to control these third parties. So what we need to make sure is that we're using it properly for the purpose of accepting payments.
So, what is Jay Scrambler's role in this?
That's also a very good question because we started doing this for the overall picture of data privacy. So protecting not only social security, passports, whatever information that you would have, we always had the generic approach of protecting everything in a customer's page. This is a subset of what we do. So this is like focusing on the credit card page or on the checkout form and on protecting the credit card information. And we are able to not only sandbox each of these third parties, and also make sure that they are not accessing the credit information in a very easy way for the merchant. Because as with all technology, if the adoption is very complex, it's not going to be properly used or it's not going to be used at all. Okay. So the key goal for us is make it simple, make the adoption very fast, be very granular, and focus exactly on what we are trying to solve. In this case, we have it control the third parties, making sure they're not accessing the credit card information.
When you are sitting across from a customer, are you sitting across from a customer who might be someone like myself who's selling merchandise on my website to support my podcast? Are you sitting across from the largest department store owner in Lisbon explaining to them, you have this responsibility now as well? Or is it some other customer?
So most of our customers are from the US. Although I'm physically now in Lisbon, most of the customers are in the US, and our focus is the US market mostly. We are talking to very large merchants, typically are the ones that have the technological capabilities that are the first to implement these standards. But this is as an application from merchandise seller such as yourself to an Amazon or an airline or someone like that. So we do cater for the full spectrum with different solutions, but mostly at the moment we are dealing with airlines, large retailers, large retailers of clothes, of wine, of tickets, like all of the ones that are doing a lot of transactions, because for them, the impact is very big. And they have the teams inside these organizations to understand how they go about implementing this, why they have to comply by 31st of March next year.
So are you talking to a chief information security officer? Or are you talking to a chief compliance officer? Or are you talking to a chief financial officer? Maybe all of the above or perhaps others?
It's interesting because this is a compliance topic, but it's also a technological topic. So we end up talking to the compliance team, but this has also to be implemented. So we end up talking also to the platform owners. So the guys that manage the website and the security/CIO. It depends on the organization where compliance sits. Sometimes this type of data compliance sits with the CIO or CISO. Sometimes it sits with another member of the team. But overall, no, I would say no company is exactly the same in terms of compliance, which is very interesting.
Do you ever have conversations with companies' boards of directors to help them understand not only sort of the technical aspect of this compliance, but really the board's role in overseeing this and the question a board needs to ask either a CISO or a chief compliance officer or a data privacy officer.
So it's a very interesting question because like initially we didn't, but with customers that we have been deploying for 2 or 3 years, we did bring up a lot of discussions to the board level. Because when we get engaged with the customer, we end up finding situations where someone at the company made a bad decision and they started sharing information with a third party that might be a partner or with some third party tool that they don't understand that it's accessing too much information to do the job that they wanted to do. And normally these discussions, they never end up at the level that they start. So imagine that the marketing team added something that is sharing all social security numbers with a third party. It's not the marketing team that's going to solve this. So the discussions end up going to C-level very fast. And our experience has always been, they really appreciate. They really appreciate the fact that they have that their team has brought in a tool that is able to map where all the information is going. Because if we hadn't been there, if we hadn't warned them or even stopped the process, they would know that down the road, it would be their job on the line. We have seen this, and you have a lot of examples in the US where companies have been brought to explain to the government what are they doing with this information? Where are they sharing it? Either consciously or unconsciously. Because the problem is that most of the time, companies don't know. So just to give a sense of the problem, a normal website has about 60 different vendors there. So 60 different companies that can access every information that is being typed or displayed on the web page each time that I interact as an end user with that page. So it's a lot of people that can mess up. A problem, some tools that are designed to enhance the user experience, if they are not properly configured, they can access, for example, credit card information. Imagine this, and you know that these tools exist, tools that track your experience on the website to make sure that you are having a good experience, that you're going through the right path, that you're not dropping at some point of the checkout process because there's some annoying problem with the website. These tools need to be properly configured to ignore and not to record. They basically record the session of each user, but not to record the credit card or even the checkout page. If they are not properly configured, then they are sending all that recording to that server, including the credit.
So you mentioned a date, I think of March 31. Uh, what steps do companies need to achieve to meet this deadline, if I had it right, of March 31?
So first, they should have started earlier. Now that it's already, we're getting too close to the date. So it's very important that they accelerate. They need to put the controls in place. They need to make sure that they know which third parties are on their checkout page. They need to be able to identify what they are doing. They need to be able to prove that, or they should be able to prove that they are not adding a web skimmer into that page. So they need to build that process and deploy it by 31 of March. Because after that, they are already not complying with the objectives of the study.
We mentioned at the very start of this podcast that PCI DSS v4 is a step forward, but it's not the end. And you might even suggest it's just the beginning. What is it the beginning of, and where do you see this process, both from the regulators, but also from vendors like yourself, and then from merchant banks or other users down to the customer experience going?
And I think that that's the vision of the future. And even like we saw a vision of the future that was accelerated during COVID, for example. I was opening a bank account on my phone without going to the bank. And there were third-party companies that were verifying my ID through my phone. We are doing a lot of stuff very fast. We are doing a lot of changes in how we work. Now the next thing is AI. AI that's capturing data and then becoming more effective at assisting the users that are on the website. Every time we have a new need, we add something to this website and we make sure that, but we are not making sure that they are not overstepping. That's what we need to do. We already have a lot of regulations. For example, in the US, you have CCPA in California, you have a lot of fragmentation on each of the states, but you already have the basis of we need to make sure that the data of our users is being used only for the purpose of the engagement itself and not something else. And we need to make sure that all these third parties that we're bringing in, they are not accessing information that they shouldn't be accessing. Either we can protect them, we can fence them against accessing the information, or they should not be there at all. The option of not being there is that you will be you will be slower than the competition. You'll have a worse experience than the competition. So I don't see that as an option. We don't want to slow down the innovation due to privacy. What we need to do is introduce systems such as the ones that we do, but it's not limited by JScramble. Other companies have also solutions in this field that are able to monitor these third parties, making sure that information of your users is not being leaked for any other purpose. There was an anecdotal example of not even a year ago, where an hospital had Google Facebook Pixel on the appointment making page with a doctor. You look at it and it looks like that's pretty normal. Every website out there has a Facebook Pixel. The problem was that Facebook was using the context of that page to then infer that person had a problem. It was an oncology appointment, so Facebook was assuming that person had cancer or was interested into cancer and started adding ads to that page. But the question is, should we allow Facebook to have some sense of my status of health? For me, it's a no. And I think for you, it's the same because it becomes very strange. But it was a simple problem. It was not even an attack. It was just like some guy, the people at marketing said the developer guy add Facebook Pixel to every page. And he did it without thinking about the consequences of what is it doing there? Where is that information going? So that's why we need to have these type of tools that are going to then, with the actual knowledge of what that website is doing, what type of information is there, is going to really fence them from accessing information that they shouldn't be accessing. So if JScramble was there, we would have been able to block Facebook Pixel. That's the idea here. Like even if someone made a mistake of adding Facebook Pixel to every page, we would still have the control to then overstep.
I mean, where do you see the need, or how do you see the need for comprehensive client side protections? And how can businesses go beyond the requirements of V4 to better protect themselves from client side risks?
What I see is that we are going to put something, organizations are going to look at this and say, okay, credit card information is important, but it's not most important data that I have on my customers. It's not the data that if I leak is going to have the most impact on my customers. My objective is that these strategies that we are putting in place for the PCI standard, which basically say, if you have a third party, you have to make sure that it's not overstepping and it's not accessing information that it shouldn't be accessing. In that case, the credit card information. It should be applicable to every page of that website and to every interaction of the user. If you look at it, a few years back, having encryption on a website was something that you'd only have on a military grade site. Today, you open every website on the web and you always have encryption. So this is the level of privacy that we want to bring as the next step. Like we don't want it to be something that's only limited to credit cards. We want it to cover every aspect of the interactions to make sure that security is not a problem. It's just part of the solution. Like you can add more third parties, you can add more companies, you can improve the experience, but with the right controls in place. That's another thing. Like the client side is a very broad definition. It's when the user is interacting with the website, and it has been ignored by the industry, the security industry, and even the compliance industry for a long time. So we are basically worried about data at rest. We are worried about the data in the servers. But when it's interacting with us, isn't it also vulnerable? Yes, it is. All the data that's in a server was at one time typed by someone or is displayed to someone else, or else there's no point in having it just in cold storage. So this is the big change in terms of thought process. We need to secure the full stack, or we are not securing the stack at all.
I think you just answered the question I'm about to ask you, but I'm going to ask you anyway because I really appreciated that, which is where do you see this going down the road to 2030? And certainly the client side protection is critical in your mind. Do you see everyone moving in that direction? When I say everyone, I mean the regulators, I mean the companies, I mean the service providers and tech providers like yourselves, as well as people like myself who might be a client and become more aware or have greater knowledge.
I think that there's work to be done both in the tech side, but also in the compliance side. If you look at GDPR, and it is a very good concept. It was a breakthrough in terms of user privacy, but at the same time, it's an annoyance. You understand, like every time I go to a website, I have to press, yes, I accept that all my information will be shared with, I don't have the time to look at this huge list of 200 vendors. So the industry fixed the problem by not fixing it, just saying, here is a list of people that I want to share our information with, and you won't have the time to look at it, so you'll just say yes. I don't want, I want to change that process. I really want to have the controls. They did it because they didn't have the capability to control all the third parties. They didn't at the time that GDPR got deployed. Today, we have. And we still don't have everything. It's going to be it's going to be an evolution either by companies such as mine and also by the standards, even by the people that make the browsers to create the capabilities to secure how the information is being accessed inside the browser itself. When I say the browser, I also say the mobile device because most people don't understand this, but their banking app most likely is just a piece of a small browser that's skin, and then they're just loading web pages. And they don't understand that this is very pervasive in the industry. So we need to do several things. First, regulations, very important. Companies not that they don't care, but they have a lot of things to do. Unless we are regulating properly, they won't take the action. But regulations are coming. We saw PCI, we saw GDPR, we saw CCPA. So that's a done deal. And as you said in the beginning, the countries are looking at and asking for answers from the companies that are accessing too much information. So this is going to be the future. How do we sandbox where the information is going? Today, we live in the Wild West. If everyone is in the room, they can go to your wallet, take your credit card, look at it. It's how it works today. In the future, we want it to work properly. If you are in a room, if you are in the web page, in this case, the analogy can be broken here. You have to have permission to access some levels of information. That's how it works on real life. That's how we need to map it also to the applications that we use to.
Unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you or find out any more information on J Scrambler or the topics we've touched on today, what might be the best place or places for them to go?
Well, for me, they can go to LinkedIn. They can find me easily by searching Rui Ribeiro, J Scrambler. And I think that regarding the company, the website is our main point of contact. This is where we publish not only the stuff that we do, but also additional information on the industry and on the compliance initiatives that we are involved. So jscrambler.com is the best place to go.
I wanted to thank you for a fascinating interview. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
That would be great. Thank you. Thank you for this, Tom. Thank you for this opportunity.